Hi there, it's Llarold. Today I'm going to be talking about patch 10.0.5, which is coming out tomorrow. Or today, depending on when you're watching this. Blizzard is releasing some good new content with the patch, including some interesting buffs to Bear Druid and Brewmaster Monk. They're also bringing back the Mage Tower. So let's just get right into the patch notes and take a look. The first new bit of content added in the patch is the Trading Post. It's a neat little way to unlock more cosmetic items in-game. It opens on February 1st. It doesn't appear when the patch goes live. It'll take a week. It will be in, or maybe closer to 2 weeks. The trading posts will be in Orgrimmar and Stormwind, so one for each faction, of course. It's a monthly event, more or less, that gives you currency you can use to buy mounts, transmogs, and pets. And you get 500 coins each month just from a cache at the trading post. You walk up to it, click it, here's 500 coins. And then you can get up to 500 more coins by doing activities, and they range all over the place. Here are some examples. Do pet battles, kill raid bosses from any expansion, kill raid bosses from Dragonflight, do Mythic Plus dungeons, do dungeons from any expansion, craft items, res allies, complete quests. It should be pretty easy to do stuff and get your 500 coins per month. I really like the trading post a lot. It's a way for Blizzard to earn a lot of favor with members of the community who want more stuff to collect in-game and more ways to unlock cosmetics in-game. Basically, it gives you something else that's fun to do, and that's kind of the point of a game. That's good. On the subject of having fun and doing stuff, they're also adding in the Storm's Fury event. This is a new piece of outdoor content that will take place every 5 hours in the Primalist future. That's the area on the other side of that bronze Dragonflight future portal in southern Thaldraszus, where you did the main storyline quest with Chromie, where you were hopping all over time. This grants, in terms of the items, it gives you 385 item level rings, trinket, and neck. It also gives you a toy, a mount, and a pet, and probably some achievements as well. Blizzard's doing a pretty good job with the outdoor content in this expansion. I'm glad that they're adding this in this patch. My only real complaint with the outdoor content so far is that the grinds are pretty long for the rewards that they give. 385 item level gear. I think that the items could definitely scale a little higher in terms of their item level, at least in my opinion. Blizzard has also made changes to some tank classes. Now, this is a really long laundry list of changes here to Druid, and then when I go down to Monk, it's going to look very similar, incredibly long. So I would rather jump into the talent section, because even though this looks very, very long, it's really not as much as it looks like. There is a lot going on with the Druid Changes, though. The quick version of it is that Blizzard is fixing a lot of the problems with the class side of the talent tree. This left side of the talent tree for Druids is maybe the worst in the game. You have a bunch of 3-point talents for very minor gains, 3% more or 6% more physical damage and armor. Lots of stuff like that. That's just not great. And this is what the new talent tree looks like. They've turned that into a 2-point talent for the same amount of budget. You just get more talents to work with. Same with Nurturing Instinct over here. That's great. They've also fixed some of the pathing along the tree to be a little bit better. Bear's spec tree is also being heavily redesigned, and this is the part where I want to say I think it's really good, but there's a problem. The problem is bugs. There are some really cool ideas here, and I'm going to cover the new talents and all based on the ideas with the hopes that the bugs are fixed, but they haven't been yet on the PTR despite plenty of feedback and reporting. So right now the expectation is that the bugs aren't fixed, and the talent setup is going to be very similar to what bears have already been using, which, just to compare, this is sort of what bears are using right now, and basically all the same talents over here on the spec side of the tree. One notable change between the two trees is that they have removed Ursine Adept, this talent that used to grant you 10% damage reduction and then also let you use all of your spells, Moonfire, Soothe, Remove Corruption, and Rebirth in bear form. That's just baseline now. So they haven't taken that away from the class. It's just baseline, which basically frees you up to have another point to spend somewhere else in the tree. One additional change that they've made is they've made it so that Innervate is castable in bear form as well, which makes that a lot more usable and makes it worth pathing down to in the spec or the class side of the tree, the non-spec side. You basically have an option over here in the left side of the tree now where you can much more cheaply, much more easily pick up Typhoon, which is great. You can also pick up Ursol's Vortex and Incapacitating Roar, or you could take Mass Entanglement or Mighty Bash, you know, if you need those types of CC instead. But you have those options of all this tons of CC as a Bear Druid, which is great, and Innervate, and potentially Nature's Vigil, or Heart of the Wild, or Well-Honed Instincts. You kind of have to choose between two of those three. I opted for Nature's Vigil and Well-Honed Instincts just to give myself like a little more defensive value out of this talent over here on the left, Well-Honed Instincts, and a little bit more group healing out of Nature's Vigil, and kind of giving up a pretty minor DPS cooldown in Heart of the Wild, but you could take that if you really wanted the damage instead. You also have to make a sacrifice up here. You basically have a choice between either Wild Charge or a second point in Thick Hide. I would rather have the damage reduction most of the time. That does mean you lose some mobility. You could take Wild Charge and then spec into Improved Sunfire and forego that whole Typhoon side there and still be able to get down here to Nature's Vigil, but there's a little bit of wiggling around in the tree required, but there are more points to wiggle around with. So all in all, good changes over here. In the right side of the tree, just to point out some of the new talents, Raise is the only new talent on this left side. There's been a lot of moving of talents over here and a lot better pathing down at the bottom of the tree, but the only new talent is Raise. Raise replaces Maul. It costs 40 rage, it makes you do physical damage, but it hits as an AoE. The problem with Raise is that it does 70% of your attack power as an AoE, whereas Maul does 120% of your attack power as a single target hit. So Raise is a single target DPS loss. That's not the only problem though. Raise is also bugged. The interaction with Tooth and Claw is bugged in a weird way. It will trigger the Tooth and Claw debuff on one enemy in the pack of mobs you AoE, but not the whole pack. If it was changed to work as an AoE Tooth and Claw cleaving ability, that would be really awesome, and I think it could even justify losing that single target damage when you're in Mythic Plus. If it's not changed, I think this talent is dead on arrival, like never gonna get used. AoE Maul casts hitting packs of enemies is good for like threat and DPS and all, and I mean, it would be amazing if it would apply Tooth and Claw. But the fact that you're losing single target damage is really bad. It's really bad for priority damage. It's obviously bad for anything in raids. So as a single target DPS loss, you're not going to opt into that as the final talent in the tree. That's silly. If this was just changed to do normal Maul damage to your primary target and then cleave everything else around it, I think that would be good enough and it would be interesting, worth taking. Another new talent, new-ish talent down here in the bottom of the tree is Lunar Beam, over on the right bottom side of the tree. Now, Lunar Beam is a talent that I liked once upon a time. It does give Bear Druids another AoE damage and healing cooldown option, but it has several problems. The obvious design flaw is that it's a 75-second cooldown, which doesn't line up with anything and is just very strange. But even worse than that, it has a hilarious bug. It's also undertuned damage-wise. It does terrible damage. I think it does like less than a Moonfire as a 75-second damage cooldown. But also, sometimes it will deal damage to you and heal your enemies. That's true. That's what it'll do. It will, instead of being a damage and healing cooldown, it's a healing and damage cooldown, but in the wrong direction. So that's bad. There are a couple of other talents down here in the right side. Moonless Night causes you to burn enemies for extra damage if they're afflicted by Moonfire, which they always should be. So this is basically a replacement for Twin Moonfire when you're in pure single target. You would just drop Twin Moonfire, take Moonless Night, and get quite a bit of extra damage out of every Maul, Mangle, and I guess Moonfire cast. And that's nice. Also down here is Thorns of Iron. Now this is a talent that I really wanted to like. I sat and kind of napkin mathed it out, and it seems like it's worth about a couple thousand DPS. It causes casting Iron Fur to do damage equal to 30% of your armor. It is physical damage, so it is mitigated by armor, and it is split among enemies within 12 yards. So as you're AoEing and you're generating a lot more rage, you will have a lot more Iron Furs to cast, but then it's splitting that damage out among a bunch of enemies. So you might be fighting 10 dudes and generating enough armor or rage rather to be just spamming Iron Fur. And that would seem like a lot of damage, but it's a couple thousand damage spread over 10 guys. We're talking 200 DPS a mob. Meanwhile, in single target, your rage generation is going to be much lower. It won't be splitting that damage as much, but it's against a single target, so you're generating less rage, you're spending fewer Iron Furs, and it's just really still only adding like a few hundred, maybe 1,000 DPS, and also being mitigated by armor. So this is a talent that unfortunately, design-wise, concept-wise, kind of interesting, but has a couple of problems that I think right now it's not going to work. It could be tuned up to be very good, but as it is, I'm not a huge fan. There is one other talent change that I want to mention, which has really upset a lot of people, and that is Berserk Ravage now has grants 50% of cooldown reduction to Mangle, Thrash, and Growl. Now, just to compare that to the old version, 100%. This means that in the past, where we've been able to, on a Bear Druid, you hit Incarn, you spam Thrash for the next 30 seconds, that's gone. Unless Blizzard makes some sort of change, which could happen, people will be upset about this. You're going to have to go Mangle, Thrash, Mangle, Thrash, Mangle, Thrash, Mangle, Thrash whenever you're in Berserker Incarnation. Because of the state of the bugged talents and problematic designs like Rays and Thorns of Iron, people are still looking like they're going to continue running Incarnation, but there was a plan initially to give up Incarnation entirely because of this, and just simply run talents like Moonless Light and Lunar Beam in their place. And then you unfortunately are kind of gated through these Berserk talents on the way to the bottom of the tree, but you would basically just opt out of bothering all that much with Incarnation. You would push more of your value into kind of steady defensive and offensive value instead of the 3-minute window that Bear currently operates on. And I do think that's a good plan for Bear Druid to transition toward. The problem with Bear Druid over the last couple of expansions has been that it is this incredibly powerful tank for 30 seconds out of every 3 minutes, and then kind of bad for the ensuing 2.5 minutes. So I think that transitioning away from this Incarn window is probably a good idea, but it isn't working quite yet. This is something I'm going to want to revisit once we get a bit more of an opportunity to play with the talents, hopefully in unbugged form. I will just finish by saying I think the option of switching to Convoke the Spirits, with Incarn being so much less interesting of a talent, kind of annoying to use now, is an option. I definitely think that Convoke is worse than just running regular Incarn and just hitting Mangle, Thrash, but it's an option. Sticking to the tried and true setup is probably the safest play, at least for the first few days or week of the new patch. Monks are the other tank that are getting some attention from Blizzard with this patch, and their attention is a lot more positive. The buffs to Brewmaster Monk are simpler. They're basically just buffing the talents at the top of the tree that weren't getting used to give monks more self-healing and more stagger removal, and they're making them all cheaper as well. So just to compare, this is the old talent setup, a fairly standard Mythic Plus setup, and this is the new one. You can see quite a bit of difference over here on the right tree. Nothing has changed on the left tree at all. Doesn't really need to, it's pretty good. But on the right tree here, the top has gotten a little bit more filled in, and you can see some talents like Gift of the Ox, Staggering Strikes, and Quick Sip have gone from all being 2-pointers down to 1-pointers, which is great. It gives you a lot more wiggle room, a lot more points to go around up top. Monks also got 2 hotfix buffs a couple of weeks ago, with Celestial Brew space cooldown getting it slashed down from 1 minute to 45 seconds. In practice, that reduced the real average cooldown from about 30 seconds to 22 seconds, which is a pretty massive buff. Monks also had their stagger percentage against magic damage buffed from 35% up to 45%, which is a pretty big pair of buffs to just throw in a hotfix like 2 weeks before you're going to buff the class. And now here we are, even more buffs. I think Monk's looking real nice now. We'll start with the damage changes to Monk over here, just to cover those real quickly. You can see Brewmaster has had Resonant Fist damage reduced, and then Keg Smash, Tiger Paw, and Blackout Kick. Every ability basically has had their damage increased. This seems like a lot. The main change here is that Resonant Fist, this talent down here in the left-hand tree, has been nerfed, and then all of the other abilities that Monk has and uses regularly have been buffed to compensate. For the most part, this is just damage neutral. Some sims were showing as much as a 2% DPS increase, some were showing the opposite, a 2% DPS loss. In general, it basically works out to all be the same. If you were good at the rotation before, you may gain a little bit more damage, but on average, it'll be pretty much no changes. Now let's actually take a look at these talents a little deeper. Going from left to right here, Staggering Strikes is still the same talent it used to be. It's 1 point now instead of 2 though, which is fine. It does interact with this talent here, Shadowboxing Treads, so it's okay in AoE at lower damage values, but I think optimizing your defenses around low damage is like, it doesn't really matter, who cares? It's not a bad talent, it's just overshadowed by the talents over to the right of it. Gift of the Ox is still a great talent, it's just 1 point now instead of 2. Unchanged other than being made cheaper, so, you know, free talent point. Hard to complain about that. Spirit of the Ox is a new talent. It makes Rising Sun Kick and Blackout Kick grant you healing spheres. The chance is, or proc rate is 8 per minute. The proc rate is increased by haste, but there's also some human error in there, so you're not going to perfectly hit all of your Blackout Kicks and Rising Sun Kicks on cooldown 100% of the time. So I think 8 procs per minute is actually a pretty realistic estimate for like real world values, and that's good. It's a bunch of healing. Giving a percentage healing increase is a little tricky since your self-healing as a monk scales directly with your damage taken, which makes it relative to the content you're doing. I would say, depending on what you're doing, if you're doing like high level Mythic Plus, like 20 pluses, it's probably 10% more self-healing, which is pretty good. If you're doing like 15s to 20s, or most heroic and mythic raid bosses, it's probably more like 20% more self-healing, which is a ton. If you're doing normal raids, or, you know, Mythic Plus up to like 10s, or you're just doing like solo world content, this is going to be a pretty massive self-healing increase. We're talking like maybe as much as 50% more self-healing, or maybe even more than that. It's great. And finally, Quick Sip has been massively buffed. It previously was worth 2% stagger removal for every 3 seconds of shuffle generation, and it cost 2 points. Now it's 5% stagger removal for every 3 seconds of shuffle, and it costs 1 point. That's a 1000% buff. I had made fun of this talent in the past. I think I had even said that it needed about a 1000% buff for it to be good, and now here we are, and it is good. It will remove a ton of stagger in between your purifying brewcasts, which is excellent. It works cumulatively with shuffle uptime too, so if you cast a Keg Smash, which grants 5 seconds of shuffle, it doesn't just proc the one time and then throw the other 2 seconds in the garbage. It saves those 2 extra seconds, so if you were to cast Keg Smash 2 times right in a row, Keg Smash, it would trigger once, then it would trigger again, or it would trigger once and hold the 2 seconds over, then it would trigger 2 times on the second cast and hold that extra second over for the next time you generate some shuffle. This works really well with Charred Passions down on the lower left side of the tree, which still currently sims as a bit worse of a talent most of the time, but that's still being worked on, so we'll see. Charred Passions has also gotten a pretty nice buff due to the increases of damage dealt by Spinning Crane Kick and Blackout Kick. You know, they've both got a 20% damage bump. I've spent some time napkin mathing out how well Quick Sip will work, and I think that hitting Spinning Crane Kick in single target like you historically would do with Charred Passions, although there's again been some sim data lately that says maybe even with Shard Passions, you should be Tiger Palming in single target if you're talented into Facepalm. In any case, I think that the napkin math kind of shows that maybe spinning Crane kicking in single target will be about comparable defensively to using Tiger Palm. And that's pretty interesting. Even if it's not, it's still clearly much stronger in AoE to spinning Crane kick. You know, you go from basically no defensive value at all to getting quite a lot of defensive value out of each spinning Crane kick and plenty of offensive value as well. That's good stuff. So this is really just a great buff to an underperforming talent that shakes a lot of things up elsewhere in the tree as well, and I like that. This is overall just a simple, strong set of buffs to Monk, a class that's already doing fairly well despite coming into the expansion being pretty underrated and thought of as pretty weak defensively. I think it's already shown that it's quite a bit better than people had expected. Now it has gotten a bunch of buffs, and it's going to have even more self-healing and less damage taken and potential shifts to some damage talents as well, which is interesting. Rushing Jade Wind probably does lose a lot of value thanks to the nerf to Resonating Fists. The main reason that Rushing Jade Wind was good is because it hits multiple times a second, and so with Resonating Fists having a 1 second internal cooldown, you could reliably trigger that damage pretty close to on cooldown. But with that damage going down by about 45% and everything else getting buffed up to compensate, maybe that's not such a high priority. Maybe you do want to just run special delivery and have a simpler rotation now, which would be nice. Certainly the gap between the more complex Rushing Jade Wind rotation and the simpler special delivery rotation has gotten a lot closer, and that's good. Very interesting times for monks. Now, originally I had written, and that's all for tanks, but Blizzard snuck in a nerf to prot warriors at the last minute. They've nerfed 3 talents in the protection spec tree, and I'll just read them out here. Brace for Impact now increases block value by 3%, was 5% per stack. Now that stacks up to 5 times, so that winds up being about a 10% reduction in block value. I'll do a little bit more of a dive on that in a second. Brutal Vitality now causes 10% of the damage you deal to add to your Ignore Pain, was 15%, and Shield Specialization now increases block value by 12% per rank, was 15%. So this is a 2 rank talent, so you're going from 30% more block value here to 24%, and then up here you're going from 25% more block value down to 15%. The developers note Protection Warriors are currently dominating tank populations. While we do want all tanks to feel powerful, our data and overall perceptions of tanks put Protection Warriors ahead of the pack. We're making some small talent adjustments that are over budget to help address this. The last little bit is a bit weirdly phrased, but they're right. Protection Warriors are ahead of the pack. They're probably a little overrated by the community, to be honest, but they are also out in front. They're the best, and so everybody definitely wants to go play it. Making some small talent adjustments to fix over budget talents, I think that's accurate. I think that these are relatively small talent changes, and these are definitely some over budget talents. So, you know, all in all, not too bad. This might feel like it's the 5th time in a row Warriors have been nerfed, and I think it actually is, but the end result here is that Warriors are still totally fine. I mean, they're very strong defensively. You lose about 5% Ignore Pain Leech with the nerf to Brutal Vitality. I think that is probably the more interesting of the set of nerfs here, rather than the block value changes. You take slightly more damage from blocked attacks. The average amount of extra damage you're going to take from blocked attacks is about 6% more damage from non-crit blocks. You actually will only take 0% more damage from crit blocks because you already have so much block value as a protection warrior that it's really easy to get your crit block value over the damage reduction cap. So the actual average amount of extra damage you're going to take in a Mythic Plus run or in a raid fight is probably only going to be like 2 or 3% more damage total because you're not taking all blockable damage all the time. That still puts Warriors way out in front of the pack in terms of damage mitigation. In general, I think Monk has gained a lot of ground with this patch's changes, and mechanically I already thought that Monks were better than Warriors for a lot of this raid tier, but now I think they're going to be a lot more competitive defensively in Mythic Plus for the rest of the season, and they hadn't been that competitive defensively in Mythic Plus, so I think this is a great set of changes. Blood DK, surprisingly, didn't get any changes at all. I felt that they're basically as strong as warriors in every way and significantly better against the last two raid fights, so that's very interesting. It certainly is a good time to be a Blood DK. I think they're kind of slipping in under the radar. Despite the bugs with bear druids, I think once those are fixed, I think that bear is going to be a lot better off in this patch than it has been for the start of the expansion. I'm hopeful that they'll get the bugs sorted out, maybe get a little bit more tuning on some of these talents and get them a little stronger, because they are kind of at the bottom of the pack right now. But I think there's a lot of reason to be hopeful that they'll get that all sorted out and bear druid will be a-okay. In general, tanks are looking really good. Pretty decently balanced in Dragonflight, I have to say. This patch is also adding the Revival Catalyst, which will allow you to convert gear in tier slots into tier set gear. They lay out all the types of gear you can convert here in the post, so just to run those down: Great Vault rewards, Mythic Plus and Raid rewards, PvP gear, Tier 2 Outdoor Storm gear and Tier 2 War Mode gear, and World Boss drops. This very notably excludes crafted gear, so you can't make a 418 crafted Spark piece and then go convert that into tier, unfortunately. One major change from the Shadowlands creation catalyst that I really like here, and liked it so much that I felt I needed to include it in this video, is that you get charges through an account-wide quest. Basically, the way it works is once a week, you'll kill raid bosses or do Mythic Plus or PvP or open world content or whatever, and fill up that bar, hand in the quest. You can do that on one character. You can do it split across your whole account, whatever. It's a fully account-wide quest. You do it. You finish it. All the characters on your account get a charge of the catalyst. Even characters that aren't level 70, even characters you haven't made yet. They all have a charge of the catalyst once you finish the weekly quest. You can bank up to 6 charges per character, and I think that's enough. This is a pretty good implementation of this system. I hated transferring Cosmic Flux back and forth between characters, or having charges available but not having the currency to convert a piece, so that I would need to go farm for a while back before Cosmic Flux was tradable. This just alleviates all of that. People wanted it sooner, and I certainly agree with that, but other than that, I think this is a pretty excellent implementation of this system. Alright, we're almost done, but not quite. The Mage Tower is coming back. Yay. Doing the Mage Tower with Dragonflight talents is going to be a lot of fun. I really liked the original Mage Tower way back in Legion. I thought the Shadowlands version was pretty fun as well. And I think that with how much bigger and more customizable the talent trees are in Dragonflight, it's going to be a lot more fun this time around. And it's definitely something I'm looking forward to getting into over the next couple of weeks. All right, that's it. I am really excited for this upcoming patch. It's adding a lot to the game, and I think it's going to be a ton of fun. I especially can't wait to get back into the Mage Tower. That's going to be a blast. Thanks for watching. Bye.